Welcome to the November programme, almost the end of the year, Kate, and this is a great way to bring the year to a close. So we've got November and December, and then it'll be 2024. So what's going on this month, Kate? What have we got on the programme in November?
Well, they say time flies when you're having fun, Nigel, and this year it has whizzed by. So we've got some awesome people on the programme today. So David James of 360 Learning, a purveyor of podcast extraordinaire. He's always got good things to say, fantastic insights. A great interview with him. Helen Marshall, who is Chief Learning Officer at Thrive. Helen's got some great experience to bring to bear, always really practical, very grounded, but she brings a good big picture view as well. So looking forward to that. And then Martin Cousins is back talking about the latest CMI report, which is taking responsibility why UK PLC needs better managers. Feel very strongly about that. So looking forward to that conversation. And then Toby Kang is kicking off a new series on employee experience design. So he'll be with us for the next few months with his own brand of enthusiasm and insights. And then Rob Clark returns with all the latest roundup of the L&D news. So busy show.
What a great show. What a great show, Kate. Thank you very much. It's a welcome back today for David James. David is the CLO of 360 Learning, and we're going to talk about something that interests both of us, skills. And the whole reskilling, upskilling, skills and jobs and all of those tricky questions, which we seem to endlessly talk about for years without very much resolution. But I hope we're going to get some resolution today. So firstly, welcome to the show, David. It's great to see you again.
Thanks, Nigel. Thanks for having me back.
And the focus is a little report, or a big report that that 360 Learning has released on fundamentally reshaping the way we think about talent. So first of all, why did you do this report? How did you gather the data, and what were the conclusions?
So the report is called The Global State of Upskilling and Reskilling. And the reason that we've done this is to take a bit of a temperature check. Skills, as you've mentioned, has been a hot topic for many years, so that's not new. But the cynic in me, Nigel, having been in the profession for a number of decades now, wanted to know whether we're in a similar situation that we've been, and I'd seen, with competencies, with behaviours and capabilities, which is a simple top-down way of trying to guide and direct people to do what we want them to do. And there was a good reason why we rebranded behaviours to competencies to capabilities, or in whatever order. And that's because it didn't work. So we wanted to do some work here. Skills is clearly a priority. And what we did was try to go for a large sample size. We got 3,600 respondents from around the world. This was independently sourced as well, so that we could find out where we're at right now, what the problems are that we're seeking to solve with all of this investment, both of time, effort, and huge amounts of money, and whether we're making any difference.
Excellent. Thank you. That's really important. The other word you didn't mention, which is a word that makes me shudder every time I hear it, is typology. And skills typologies. Having at one time in my naive earlier days invested something like £35,000 in a skills typology. And guess what? Do you think it was used, apart from being presented beautifully and being packaged in a wonderful document? That was the last anyone ever saw of it. Goodbye, £35,000. So yeah, if you can sort this out. Conclusions. What did you discover, having interviewed a pretty reasonable group of people from a very good geographical spread? What were your conclusions?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to state that we figured out that there are real problems. This was the easy part, that we know this. What I think is so different from skills to the others that I've mentioned is that skills is a language that our business leaders talk about, as well as the HR leaders and learning and development. And that is because we recognized, in this survey, that there were four main culprits contributing to the widening skills gaps in our organizations and across industries and economies. Those being a loss of internal skills and knowledge. Almost half of talent teams are experiencing this, and this is recognized as baby boomer generation exiting the workforce and taking decades of invaluable experience and knowledge with them as they go. There's also the higher turnover of the newer generations into the workforce, with more than 60% of talent teams reporting this. And that's we've recognized that younger employees are more mobile and they're seeking new opportunities and experiences, which of course creates a deficit in our organizations. There's also the shorter shelf life of skills, which has been spoken about now for over a decade. As we only need to take AI as an example, with it expected to disrupt 1.4 billion jobs across the world. And of course, that's going to require some reskilling. And then finally, which I think is finally, but by no means less important, 60% of talent leaders said that the demand for emerging skills is outstripping supply. So these skills aren't readily available in the market. Perhaps they're so in demand, and those owners of those skills, as well as being very scarce, know their value as well. So there is real reason here for leaders of our businesses, as well as within HR and L&D, are recognizing that there is a burning platform here, and that we need to do something, and we need to do something that works and makes impact, so that the term skills doesn't enter the dustbin with competencies, behaviors, and capabilities, and that learning and development take this opportunity that we've been handed.
So what do we do? Dave? What are you advising the companies that you work with to do?
Right. So I think it's really important that there were some key challenges that talent and learning and development teams were facing themselves. Number one, almost half of those that responded said that there was a lack of skills assessment. So saying a lot of them are flying blind. Less than that report that upskilling and reskilling is slow. And of course, if you're not directing this towards a particular goal, then it might not be. You could move fast, but you'd still not be getting anywhere. And then this was the really shocking part for me, that I think that provides us with a huge opportunity, Nigel, is only a third of employees reported having clear career paths. Now, for a long time, for as long as I've been in learning and development, we've aimed to gain the self-directed learner. We thought that if we supplied them with on-demand content or experiences, then they would be self-directed, they would learn, and they would become more capable. But how on earth are they supposed to if we're not providing them with the options of what the next step looks like? So I think all of those say that we're not providing the guidance. We're not collecting enough intel. We're not determining what it is that we need from other people and how close they are or where they need to go to. And so in the absence of this, we might have a lot of money spent, a lot of goodwill, and a lot of time spent learning, as well as a heavy investment. But it's not leading to a demonstrable change. Another couple of really interesting insights, and then I'll be happy to talk about what we need to do instead, is when it comes to transitions, 2/3 of employees cited a lack of or a complete absence of any role or job related guidance. Again, an LMS filled full of generic content, but nothing related to making that transition within our organization. So if we're upskilling and reskilling in order to have more confident and competent employees in new roles, then we're not doing anything enough to ensure that there is that smooth transition. And also, only this. I mean, this is the kicker. This. For me, you could look at this one of two ways. It could either be disaster zone or a huge opportunity. I'd rather look at it the opportunity. Nigel, can you believe only a quarter of L&D teams told us that they were involved in mapping skills and driving upskilling and reskilling strategies? A quarter. Now, Miriam Neelan told me on the L&D podcast, if we've not been doing upskilling and reskilling in learning and development for the last few decades, what on earth have we been doing? So if we're not renowned for doing this and the go-to team, you've got to ask that question.
You have. I think that's right. But your description there, you're giving the clues to the solution.
Mm,
And one of the things that is remarkably absent from that description of what's wrong is that link between skills and jobs. It's like
mm,
we develop skills in absentia of any relationship with jobs. And the
yeah.
result is that staff are cynical. I think there's also an issue around generative skills. We need people to have the building block skills that from which they can build
Mm,
other practical skills that they can use temporarily and then maybe develop new practical skills. But those generative skills last for a long time and we're not
mm,
focusing on those. So, okay, what would you say to that person saying, David, we are completely stuffed here. There's a
mm.
massive skills gap. Can't get the staff motivated in doing anything. We're pouring money in with no impact. What do we do, please?
So there's a lot of talk, Nigel, about skills-based organizations and skills-based learning. Now, I think that skills-based organizations, it is it's a nice idea, and some organizations will go all in, but you and I know that not all will. There's a lot supporting the way that organizations currently run, that isn't easily disrupted. But skills-based learning is an approach that we can take, whether our organization wants to go the whole way or not. And what we mean by that is mapping the skills of the organization so that we can understand where we're strong and perhaps where there's deficit. But really importantly, what skills are required in order to support the workforce today and tomorrow. It's a really interesting way of exploring development, because if we're simply task focused, it's really easy for us to say that we don't have the right people. But surely wholesale change is a poor cousin to seeing what we can do with the talents and skills that we already have. So skills-based approach to learning recognizes that you might think you've got the wrong people, but unless you know what they're capable of in terms of the skills, then perhaps you won't know. So skills mapping is really important. Then identifying skills gaps between an employee's current level of skill and the required level of skill as well. Providing guidance and support to help with actual transitions prior to the actual transition, and as people move either sideways or up into our organizations in order to fulfill the requirements of particular projects or roles. And the reason I think that this is I'm interested in this now is that generative AI provides us an enormous opportunity to do a lot of this stuff far more comprehensively than we could ever have dreamed of before, linking outside benchmarking data with internal role specifications that can then help to turn self-assessments and manager assessments, third-party assessments or stakeholder assessments into journeys to help people to get from where they are and provide that guidance, the career path, or simply that road towards skill development that perhaps was absent before. And generative AI can keep these updated as well, rather than that being a manual job, because we did a huge amount of work at Disney on job families. I think it took 2 or 3 years, and you had this funny feeling that as soon as it was press publish was done, it was been out of date, which again is a
Obsolete.
blocker to people even investing the time. But this can remain alive. And then what we can do is we can measure the impact of our efforts if we've done the mapping, we've done the skills gap analysis, we've got the guidance and support linked to jobs, roles, tasks that are expected within our organization. Then we can measure our impact on our ability to recruit from inside rather than outside of our organizations. Nigel, we've asked for a seat at the table for a long, long time, but if we're not being looked at to drive the skills strategy, you can see why we're not. But this, without permission, this is us stepping up to the plate and saying, hey, this is mine. This is what I can do. And I think that the generative AI, as well as the will and the inclination to think beyond providing learning, is going to be the differentiator.
Yeah. So basically, person comes armed with data, deep data, data from inside the organization, data from outside the organization, and with an agenda for action. That person is going to be listened to much more than someone walking in and saying, well, we could run a few courses, I guess. What sort of things do you want us to do? So click on the link, we'll write down the link, and it's 360 Learning, the guide section of the website, if you want to instantly go there now and digest something that is well worth reading. And if, at the very, very least, food for thought. So, David, it's really a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for your time, and good luck with, I think, probably an agenda that is going to keep you going for a good while yet. We're not
Thanks,
there,
Nigel.
but I hope we will get there, and you will share some of the success stories with me.
Will do. Thanks, Nigel.
Upskill and inform your learners with Mind Tools for Business. Empower your people to thrive at work and help them step up and meet everyday workplace challenges with confidence. Our toolkit provides unlimited access to thousands of quality assured resources, all in one place. It's easy to use and on demand, anytime, anywhere. Experience stress-free onboarding with dedicated client partner support. And get access to our library of industry insight and expert analysis. Perform, manage, lead with Mind Tools for Business. Visit mindtoolsbusiness.com to find out more.
Next up is our roving reporter, Rob Clark, who brings us all the latest learning news. This month, he's looking at a preview of the Mind Tools benchmark report, always important. I'll be looking forward to that. And taking many, many notes when that comes out. He's looking at L&D's progress as a business partner, super important topic, and also a look at London's new VR Skills Lab.
L&D is shifting into a business partner. How far has it progressed? Mind Tools' latest benchmark report has the answer. Extended reality design skills. There are not enough of them. A new training lab is opening in London. Video avatars are improving, bringing a whole new world of opportunities to learning developers. Learning and development is shifting from a training provider to a business partner. Those familiar with the annual L&D benchmark reports from Mind Tools that we cover regularly on Learning News will know that around 3/4 of L&D is still stuck implementing and transacting courses. Part 2 of this year's report shows the difference high-performing L&D teams have on business and how business leaders are twice as likely to work with them, and that they recognise the alignment of learning with their business plan.
We've identified strategic and business alignment as being a marker really of a top performing team. And like you say, globally, this is the area or practice that I think most L&D teams, regardless of their performance, have actually improved the most this year. We've seen more L&D teams focusing on things like how they can make their strategy more agile so that they can allow for changing business priorities. We've seen more teams checking that their activity is in line with the goals of the business. And we've seen more teams reviewing programs to check that they support these goals as well. The difficulty, I think, doesn't fall directly with L&D. You know, they are improving the areas that they can control. The problem is about other stakeholders in the business. And I think most organisations still don't have board level accountability for learning. And in fact, more than 70% of L&D professionals tell us that they do not work with senior management at all to agree things like KPIs or metrics to measure learning impact. So in fact, very few organisations also tell us that, you know, all stakeholders in the business share the same vision for learning. And that is a problem. You know, I think this is where the hard work is really needed. L&D have to figure out how to share the responsibility for learning with their leaders, with their managers, their learners, because actually everybody does have a part to play. And I think that many stakeholders just don't recognise it yet.
A new extended reality training lab is opening in London at City University. It's the largest of its kind in the country and will train up to 50 students simultaneously in virtual reality and its applications in engineering, computer science and maths.
The City University of London, as you said, is opening this biggest extended reality lab in UK, which will provide a practical space to innovate and practice new industrial processes to deliver social and economic value. In fact, you need to know that the World Economic Forum reports that 66% of companies over the next 4 years plan to adopt this technology. And the market needs those skills now, and we need even more people with extended reality skills and knowledge. So the Excel Lab at the City University of London we'll use our software to train, practice AR and VR real scenarios.
Video avatars, digital people for us to use in training resources. We're starting to see them more often, including scarily realistic versions of ourselves. They're getting easier to create and more accessible to learning and development teams.
The use cases for digital avatars are essentially every single kind of learning application you can think of. And really, it's about what it enables you to do, which I think is specifically iterative design. This is not something that has been very prominent in video before. As a learning team, if you were wanting to film someone, it was an expensive process. And with our software, you can create videos very, very easily, and you can get feedback, and then you can change them very easily. So I think the iterative design piece is the biggest use case in a way. It's almost a new way to work for L&D teams, especially with video. But that's not all, right? We've also got some incredible features around localization. Previously, again, if you wanted to get your content translated into whatever language, it was a pretty long and expensive process, but with us, it's about 4 clicks away to translate it into about 100 languages. We have a prompt to video feature. So this is essentially allows you to just give a prompt like you would to ChatGPT and say, make me a video about, I don't know, a goldfish or whatever. and it will just do that for you.
That's Learning News for November. Thank you to each of my guests. We appreciate you coming on. As always, the full news features on L&D's progress as a business partner, London's VR Skills Lab and video avatars are on the website. Thank you very much for your company. Back to Kate and Nigel.
Are you ever in meetings or events where 1 or 2 people dominate? It doesn't have to be that way. You can get an equal voice for your people through liberating structures. Liberating structures are 33 structures that give people a full equal voice. Check them out on www.happy.co.uk and type in liberating structures. We do them online, we do them in the classroom, and they are brilliant.
Helen Marshall and I have spoken previously on Learning Now TV, but this is the first chance I've had to talk to her now she's working for Thrive. So my first question, Helen, is firstly, welcome. It's really great to see you again. But tell me about Thrive. What does Thrive do? What are its aspirations and its mission?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be back. And yeah, for those who don't know Thrive, we are an all-in-one LMS platform. So people come to us for their learning solutions for their organizations. So we work with brands across the globe as a learning platform provider, or we create off-the-shelf content in suites of sector-specific content for people as well. We also guide people who are our platform customers. We work very closely with the L&D teams in our customers' businesses to showcase impact through the products that we serve to them as well.
Excellent. Yes. So, Helen, you're CLO, Chief Learning Officer of Thrive. What do you do then? What is your role in all of that process?
Well, I think Chief Learning Officer is a really interesting role for a vendor to have, and not one that many vendors do have in their businesses. And whilst I think a CLO would most often be seen as an internally focused role, my job for Thrive is to talk about all the good stuff that we're doing as a product within the business and relay that out into the wider industry. So through talking to people like yourself, or doing conference papers, or talking on exhibition floors, doing podcast episodes, whatever that looks like in terms of that wider community engagement. But then the other side of that is also I have an ear to the ground about what's going on in the industry, talk to a lot of people, find out about what people are talking about, what the trends are, how people are responding to things. And I therefore then bring that back into the business and say, people are talking about this. We really need to be focused on this as like a next port of call, or just something that we should be part of a conversation on. So really unique position to be in this role. And I do have an oversight of what's going on internally in terms of how we develop our own people as well. But the core focus of my role is that kind of the voice of what good learning looks like for Thrive in the wider industry. But the other side of my role is also I host a podcast called Diary of a CLO, which has been hugely successful this year. We launched in March, right at the beginning of March on International Women's Day. And since then, we've seen over 10,000 unique listens to the podcast. We have about 350 followers. It's been hugely successful so far. So I'm told, based on other podcast stats. And so that's been a great part of my role, like talking to as many really interesting people as possible.
So all of the things you've said, what it strikes me is that you are genuinely the chief learning officer. In other words, you're the person who is bringing learning from outside into the organization so that the organization can process that learning. You're also the chief learning officer, in that you're taking learning from you into your customers and helping your clients get better at their own learning. And you're chief learning officer in that you are encouraging communication and connection around some of the core issues, both inside and outside the organization. Is that a fair summary?
Well, that's a lovely and eloquent summary of my role, and it's so nice to hear it reflected back in that way, because it's absolutely true. It's that learning from other people and hearing what is going on, what is important to our customers. So there is an element of working with the customers that we currently serve, but then thinking about, if I was at an event, who I speak to, what's important to them, talking to other vendors who are exhibiting in certain spaces, and seeing if we're all on the same page in terms of what's important, and being able to kind of build those relationships in a really meaningful way, which I think sometimes in the vendor and supplier space hasn't been done as consciously as it could have been. So there's obviously always an element of competition, but it doesn't have to be a negative connotation. It can be, you can positively challenge each other to do better and be better, and that's really what my role has been about, is building that trust, positively challenging. And like you say, bringing that learning that I'm hearing about stuff that's going on, and thinking, actually, maybe we need to bring that in, or we're bang on with this. We know that we're on the right track. And that's been a really exciting thing recently to do with the influx of AI, and thinking about how that's impacting the learning tech space, and being able to unite as a full business around this topic, because yes, we're all interested in learning and how people learn, but actually every part that I'm noticing, every part in our business, from our developers to our content team to marketing to sales to whoever in the business, is really interested in how AI is impacting our daily lives as well as our product. So there's that kind of innate level of interest in what's going on right now. So it's been a much broader conversation. It's been really nice to be part of. But
in some ways, every organisation should have a Helen Marshall. It's one of the gaps that I find in organisations I work with. They've got no one who is consciously bringing insight in from outside and trying to spin it around the organisation so the organisation gets smarter, not just the individuals. And I think it's a very important role, and it's particularly in smallish organisations. Like Thrive isn't small, but it's smallish. I would say it's not a 10,000 people organisation. It desperately needs that, because if it doesn't stay tuned in to the inner ear of its customer, or to the bigger trends and fluctuations of the marketplace, it's going to be in trouble. So you've got a really important role in keeping what I would say is keeping the organization aligned, aligned to the world out there, and aligned to the bigger interests and concerns of its customers. Because in such a fast changing world, what works on a Monday tends to be completely redundant by Friday. And you need to rethink it by the following Monday. And you're the one part of the organization that is empowered to do that. You've been kind of given a license to roam in a way, haven't you?
And I think what's been missing previously is that we're in a hugely fortunate position. We have about nearly 170 people that work for the company now, but and amongst those people are hugely passionate and knowledgeable people who do know what's going on in the business, in the in the industry and are really interested in new developments and trends. But there's been that lack of almost golden thread amongst people. Like I'm going to go and have a conversation with one of our co-founders, and then I'm going to go and talk to our VP of customer success. I'm going to talk to our chief sales officer, and then piece together those conversations and be like, actually, we need to be better aligned, or we're all on the same page, or these are the themes that are coming out of that. And it's been a really kind of refreshing approach to linking everything together. And like you say, I do genuinely think that more organizations who are a similar ilk to thrive need a role like mine to do that for them, and to build those relationships outside of the bubble that you're in. Because obviously when we're all together in a room, we're thinking like, this is the best thing, like we genuinely believe in our product, and rightly so. But what's the industry saying, and are we on the right track? And how can we be kind of reflective of that and bring it all together? So yeah.
And it seems to me that you are the kind of systems integrator in a way. You're pulling all the different parts of the organization. Not just you, but you see part of your role is to connect the customer insights with product development, with technology, and so on, so that you keep everything moving smoothly. In some ways, you're a kind of oil can in the organization. You're lubricating where necessary, and pointing out when the gears are graunching, and trying to replace any parts before they break down.
I think it's been a little bit of a learning curve for us. Like, obviously, I moved into this role, so I've been with Thrive for 2 years now. I started off as head of learning and moved into the role of CLO in January of this year. So I've been in it for 10 months now, and because it was a new role, we didn't really know what to expect. We didn't really know the full parameters of where it might go or what it might look like. There's that element of kind of getting used to things and understanding what the benefit is that I can bring to the business. So I fully acknowledge that we are still on that learning curve, and how we communicate those things and how I help to guide the business is evolving and is changing. And we've learned lessons about actually I need to be more vocal over here and involved in the conversations over here. And I think that's a learning curve for all of us in the business, because it's such a unique role. And
yes, and I'm sure it will keep evolving, because if you're going to stay tuned in, by definition, almost, it will evolve and become, I hope, more and more interesting and more a learning curve for you. You must have learned a huge amount in being right in the middle of the organization, being able to talk to virtually anybody in it and understand the way it all knits together.
Yeah, and that's both been such a hugely positive part of the role, but also the most challenging part as well, because it's, a large proportion of my time is spent talking to people and then reflecting on that information and then relaying it in ways that I see fit, or translating it into content that I'm creating, that I'm putting out in the wider community, or vice versa, kind of translating what I'm hearing in conversations with the industry back into the product, and figuring out the way to do that in the best way has been tricky. But yeah, so it's been a hugely positive part of the role. It's part of the role that I absolutely love, is that, being able to talk to people and think about what challenges they're facing and what ideas they can bring to the table. But also, like, the other side of that is knowing how and when to communicate things. And communication is such an important part for any organization, and everyone's on a journey of how they do that better and more smoothly. But yeah, it's been interesting.
It's been, I think, I would say, fascinating rather than interesting, and long may it continue. Helen, it's been a pleasure to talk to you, and we'll put on the screen crawls so that people can work out how to subscribe to your podcast, and we'll put some information about Thrive on the screen. So if anyone wants to follow up, they've got some points of access for doing that. But in the meantime, I wish you luck, and I will watch with interest as the role begins to evolve and mature over time, as the organization evolves and matures over time.
Thank you so much.
This is the start of a very new, interesting series on Learning Now TV by Toby Keng. What he's going to focus on is essentially employee experience design and what L&D can do to influence the broader, essentially the broader HR agenda in an organization. It's really important, very interesting discussion, and highly commended.
So, learning and development is in a really great place now. There's lots of conversation about human-centered design and focusing on user needs and marketing for learning. There's loads of great stuff that's happening in our industry at the moment. But what I'm constantly concerned of is the impact that we're having and how do we maximize that impact. And learning and development is one of those functions inside a wider HR team that really innovates and pushes the envelope time and time again. And I think really to have even more impact moving forward, it's to integrate itself into a wider HR strategy that really looks to demonstrate value to employees. So what I'm going to be talking about over the next 6 months, starting today, is about employee experience design and how learning and development can really feed into that. And that's because there's kind of 4 real key areas that we need to focus on. The first one is data. So we've talked about data and learning for a long time, but really when you want to make the most out of user data, it needs to be connected with every single data point within a HR department. So data and having that as a central data lake for all employee data, where all your learning data is also plugged in there with recruitment and attraction and leadership, is incredibly important. And we'll only achieve that by plugging into a wider HR strategy. The other one is diversity. So we talk about personalized learning quite a lot, but really it's about diversity. So every organization will go out there and talk about wanting a more diverse workforce, which is fantastic. And employer brand does a really good job of trying to attract a diverse workforce. However, when they get inside an organization, what you tend to find is that they are all treated the same. So personalized learning helps employees kind of get a different experience, but that has to be fed through every facet of an employee experience in HR design. So whilst we talk about personalized learning, what we really should be doing is talking about a personalized learning experience that appreciates a diverse employee set. The other one is value. So the value we offer employees. This is a really important one because more than ever, employees are more akin to customers than they have been employees for the past 20 to 30 years. And the HR function and learning development has to offer tangible value, not only to the business, but also to the end user as well. So by understanding how much you're spending and also how much an employee values that product or service that HR or learning and development are offering, and understanding that difference is key to really figuring out how much value you're offering your employees and in turn the business. And then the fourth one is advocacy. So what we look at now is the tenure, or the average tenure of employees is way shorter than it used to be. And that is fine. But HR and learning and development and talent is all kind of built on this assumption that it's going to be careers for life at a certain organization. And that's not really the case anymore. And there's 2 things you can really do. You can develop a learning and development or HR strategy that fights against that, or you can design one that leans into it and really understands that at some point, your employees are going to leave you. Now, when you design an employee experience for that, you end up with a much different proposition, an open and honest conversation with employees that their learning and development journey, their promotion, their career is not going to live and die at that one organization. And if you center those conversations around that honesty, you create a more pragmatic approach to learning and development and employee experience for that one employee, in fact, all of your employees. The net result out of that is you end up with advocates because you've lent into that and you've appreciated the fact that that is how the world works, and as an employee, that's how they work. That advocacy will pay back in sales, partnerships, and recruitment opportunities as well. So advocacy from employees before, during, and after they've left a company is super important. So they're the 4 things that are really driving the change in learning and development and getting HR strategy to lean into human-centered design. So like I say, over the next 5 months, we're going to be talking about how to practically do this. But top level, it's really taking into account two things from marketing. So if you look at the marketing and sales funnel and how they attract, onboard, retain, and create advocates essentially of brands and products, there's a really great framework out there already that we can apply to HR, learning development, and all those facets in between. The second one is the principle of customer lifetime value, and understanding that the value you get from a customer isn't just from a single moment in time, it's how you measure and track that over the lifetime. So by applying those two principles to learning and development within a wider HR strategy that appreciates employee experience, you start to really move the needle in what we can offer employees. Now, I call it CX for EX, customer experience for employee experience. That's kind of my shorthand for it. So if you've ever seen me write it, that's what it is. And that's because I went on holiday about last year and I saw my uncle for the first time in about 5 to 6 years, and he asked me what I did. And people have asked me that for a very, very long time, and I've never been able to articulate it. And he just went, after I spent 10 minutes trying to explain what it is, he said, "Oh, you do CX for EX." So thanks to my uncle, I've taken that, and that is my new strap line for what I do. And people seem to understand it a bit more. Now, the one thing I want to highlight finally before I leave you is that I really think when we look at this kind of almost revolutionary approach to HR and learning and development, we're going to have to start small. Because if you were to apply this principle and some of the things that I'm about to tell you over the next 5 months to larger corporations, we'd really, really struggle. The amount of change in both people and technology to enable everything that I've just said would be extremely complex and require quite a substantial transformation. So my belief and my prediction for the future is that it will be the small to medium businesses that will adopt this approach first, and then those larger corporations will look at them and start to copy what they're doing. Much like Starling, Monzo, and Revolut did a couple of years ago when they disrupted the fintech industry. They did something new, they did something different, and all the larger banks copied. So that is my one prediction that I'm offering you today. And with that, I'll leave you.
In the L&D world, we all know our biggest challenge is knowledge fade and demonstrating ROI from our training interventions. At Elephants Don't Forget, we use artificial intelligence to guarantee that what you train your employees, they learn and retain. If you are looking to transform the impact your training content has in your business, improve the ROI, and perhaps help employees learn and retain even the dull regulatory material, drop me a line at nelly@elephantsdon'tforget.com.
Another month and another report. This is the Martin Cousins slot, much beloved of viewers for Learning Now TV. So Martin, thank you for joining me today, and tell me what report is going to delight us this morning.
Well, it's a UK-based report, Nigel, and it's called Taking Responsibility, Why UK PLC Needs Better Managers. And it's been produced by the Chartered Management Institute. So it's a kind of state of the nation of managers, really. And I think it's useful because they're such a key stakeholder group for learning teams. So, yeah, it surveyed 2,500 managers, around 2,000 employees who do not have management experience, and also another 1,000 managers who are accredited with the Chartered Management Institute. So they talked to them about kind of, what was good practice, I think. So, yeah, significant bit of research.
Excellent. So, what is it telling us? What have we learnt reading this that we didn't know before?
Well, I think it's, as a state of the nation bit of research, it just kind of tells us that 82% of people become managers without any formal training. So the Chartered Management Institute call these accidental managers. So I think that's quite important that we talk about the effectiveness, and this research looks at the effectiveness of managers, but actually a lot of managers just don't have any training. They have no idea how to be a manager, and 82% is a high proportion of the workforce or of the management cohort. So it goes into some details. I'll give you a few headlines. Workers who rate their manager as ineffective are a lot more likely to be planning to leave their organisation in the next 12 months. That's 50% versus those who say they have effective managers. So, that's just one of the big effects of having a poor manager. You're going to have team mates who are basically keen to leave. I think a couple of other stats that I would highlight. 46% of managers agreed that people were promoted based on internal relationships rather than their ability and performance. So I think, that it's painting a picture that a lot of people are accidental managers. For some cohorts within the management group, such as women and carers, basically they're less likely to have any kind of support. And then we can drop down into what this means. And I think there's some quite interesting set of outcomes from the managers who are effective versus those that are ineffective. And the research goes into quite a lot of detail around that.
Yeah, it does. I agree with you. And it's basically stark. The words of Anne Frank, who is the chief executive, kind of rang true to me. So that is essentially what we end up with is a toxic culture that creates real negativity in the workforce, smacks down productivity, and encourages people to look for jobs. As opposed to, here she says, managers from across the economy decide the trust, collaboration, and results that flow from good management and leadership. So there's a big upside and a big prize to win by ensuring that there is good management and leadership in an organization. And it doesn't seem like rocket science that if you put people in a role with absolutely no support, no development, they will simply follow their leader. They follow the person who was there before them, or they will follow the person who's there ahead of them. And if that person happens to be toxic, the toxicity just spreads and spreads and spreads. And just as if you're a toxic manager, the people looking to you to be the next generation of leaders will follow your lead and behave in exactly the same way. So you get this vicious circle of ingrained incompetence going through generations, or you break into the circle, set standards and behaviors, and you drive up engagement and productivity as a result. It's not incredibly complicated.
And I think there are some stats in here that really kind of confirm what you're saying. There's a chart that looks at the way effective managers spread positivity across organizations. So they compare workers with an ineffective manager to workers with an effective manager. Now, on some of these scores, there's a massive difference, which is really alarming. So those with an ineffective manager, 15% say they feel valued and appreciated versus 72%. 34% I feel motivated to do a good job versus 77% with an effective manager. 27% I'm satisfied with my current job. 74% of those with an effective manager. It goes on. It's really, and then it's more worrying when 21%, that's the percentage that would recommend an organisation as a good place to work versus 68% who have a good manager. So there's massive downsides to having ineffective managers, and clearly massive upsides if you've got good managers. I think the other thing that this talks about is, we talk about learning culture. So, viewers will be only too aware of this subject. It's such a hot topic for corporate learning teams. Ineffective managers, those are ineffective managers. 22% say, I agree that the organisation has a good company culture. And that goes up to 67% for effective managers. You can't begin to look at a learning culture unless you get this stuff right. And I think, again, we all know this, but it does reaffirm that idea that, the managers as a stakeholder group for learning, have the keys to performance, to a better culture, and ultimately to a learning culture. So I think this is a useful bit of research to benchmark where you're at, to have the conversation internally, and to really help, work with managers to understand their challenges and to help them overcome them.
What it shows, Martin, it's just the incredible extrapolation from my relationship with my manager to my belief about the organization as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got an effective manager, then you think the organization as a whole has a good company culture. If you have an ineffective manager, then you're far more likely to think that the organization has an absolute rubbish culture. And it even comes to compensation and benefits. 25% only think that they're happy with their compensation and benefits when they work for an ineffective manager. This leaps to 57% with an effective manager. That's got nothing to do with the manager. The manager doesn't set their compensation and benefits. It's the organization as a whole. So that lens, I think, is very, very interesting. So if you can set the relationship right between employee and manager, you're likely to get massive cross-organizational benefits that will accrue, just as if you don't make any attempt to reset that relationship and allow toxicity to creep in. It affects the whole organization and the whole perception of the individual about the organization, with the resultant drop in productivity, engagement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's really akin, Martin, to the research. When I was doing my book on learning culture, I started looking at the learning. And very quickly, as I began talking to organizations and reading about the subject, I realized I was completely wrong. I was barking up the wrong tree. And that if you want a learning culture, you fix the conditions, you fix the culture in the organization. And the learning culture kind of spontaneously grows around that. And this is what this is saying too, that you don't get a learning culture just by increasing the quantum of learning. I guess that's a culture of learning, if you like, but it's not a learning culture. And you won't get the massive productivity boost that a learning culture gives if 90% or even 50% of staff don't trust their manager, don't reveal their weaknesses, don't admit there are problems, don't ask for help. All of these things are absolutely fundamental to a learning culture, and therefore fundamental to the relationship with the manager. And organizations are naive in a way, is that they just think it's X is not all that good a manager, but they try, do their best. It's not acceptable. It's not acceptable. You have to set very strong behavioral standards. And then guess what? You have to implement them, which is a whole new ball game for many organizations. So I think this is putting its finger on something extremely interesting. And I think it's a really big agenda for that L&D. Fix the organization. Don't just focus on fixing learning or increasing the quantum of learning or bringing in a zappy-do new piece of technology. Fix the culture. Fix the organization. Make engaged workers more happy and motivated in the organization, and the learning will just drop into place. So, Martin, any last thoughts?
I'm perplexed by why this issue of the manager as a stakeholder group continues to challenge the organisation and learning development, and I think that this research kind of helps helps us yet again understand what's at play here. So I would hope that this kind of research just provides the prompts to really be, getting managers together, really trying to help support them more and more, because they are so important. And I think it's changing because of the hybrid workplace, the nature of work, the new tools that we're using. This stuff is really, really important, and it's not going to go away. So I think it's just that annual prompt from the CMI with their research to say, just keep thinking about how you can improve supporting and developing managers so that they can do that with their own teams.
Yes, I think that's very wise. And thank you again, Martin, for drawing this report to our attention. Thank you very much. See you soon.
Yeah, thanks, Nigel.
Kate, that was such an excellent program. Highlights for you. What do you want to chat about?
Well, I mean, there's just golden nuggets galore, really. But I think, as I mentioned at the top of the show, the piece around better managers, that really strikes a chord for me. I've been looking at performance management quite a lot, and what that means and how that's evolving or not evolving, in the new role that I'm doing. And managers play such an important part of that. Like, we can have, there are great software solutions out there to support the process, but you've got to be able to have that relationship with your manager. And stepping into a new role at the moment, I'm really enjoying building that relationship out and seeing how that management structure works, for my own team and across a bigger organization. But just feel so passionately. There's so much behavior change and sort of the impact of learning that's locked up in managers, allowing their people to do what they need to do and supporting them along the way, but without micromanaging. And it's hard. It's hard being a manager. People are not robots.
It is. It's very hard. What I was slightly surprised about was the fact that they don't talk about leaders, or they kind of interchange leaders and managers. And I think it's very different. And in some ways, I think what CMI's discussion needs to get involved in is that difference. And also, some of the things you're talking about require leadership, not just management, not just people who can, do a decent job going through the processes. You need leaders who can empower people and take risks and move away from the norm. But it's a good report. It's worth reading, and it's a British report based on data from the UK, which is rare. Mostly this stuff comes from US or worldwide. So well worth a look, and good old CMI for doing something like that. Right. So, Kate, can I just talk about what we've got coming up in the next few months? I'd like to enlighten people.
Out and plan for 2024.
Well, 5th to the 7th of December, still 2023, but only the last event of 2023 really is the learning event in Orlando. 5th to the 7th of December, 2023, learning in Orlando. So that's getting very, very close now. Then we get into 2024, and it's the World of Learning Summit in London on the 30th to the 31st of January, the Learning Awards ceremony on the 25th of February, and we couldn't possibly forget the Learning Technologies Conference on the 17th and 18th of April in the Excel Exhibition Centre in East London. But I've got a bit of an announcement, Kate. I am going to be running 3 webinars to introduce and sort of promote and discuss some themes in my new book. It's not quite finished, but it should be finished by Christmas. It'll probably be published in April or May next year. But on the 25th of January, we're talking about the organizational brain. The 7th of March, we're focusing on getting external information, building knowledge networks outside the organization as well as inside. And then on the 23rd of April, we're going to be focusing on how you make organizations less toxic, happier, where people are willing to share, ask for help, admit when they've made a mistake, all that kind of stuff. And on my website, nigelpayne.com, there's all sorts of details, and you can register for free for any one or hopefully for all 3 of those webinars. So that's my little bit of news as well, Kate.
Well, sign me up. I mean, that's exciting. Congratulations on the book. And obviously, I can't wait to see it. I referenced your previous book a lot. And I think, having recently sort of moved into a new role in a new organization as well, it's endlessly fascinating that organizational culture and looking at how you embed that learning mindset in. So I'm excited. Sign me up.
Great. And we'll be back. We'll be signed up again 21st of December, just before Christmas. We'll all be excited at that point. Christmas hats and full of the joys. Thank you very much. See you next month.
Bye for now.